In the next few minutes, we'll walk through the process of creating a worship calendar, an annual worship calendar that organizes what your services are about and who's involved in them through the year. I've sat down with a completely blank spreadsheet to start to remind us that it can be really intimidating at the beginning of the year to look at a big swath of nothing and not know where to start. We'll walk through the process of building this thing, start to finish, and the place to start is by putting in dates and themes. So here you can see I've put in all of the Sundays. This is the current 21-22 church year. We start at the beginning of August and we wrap up at the end of May out here in Colorado. Your year might look different than that. We also, in this congregation, follow themes so that each month we're using the Soul Matters themes for that month. So at this point, it's really just data entry. The next step is to look at all of these Sundays and say, hey, is there something already determined for those Sundays? Are there holidays? Are there church events? Are there things going on in the community that are going to determine what the service needs to be that Sunday? So the next thing I do after setting up my months and my dates and my themes is to start layering in holidays and events. Now, I've put it under a speaker column because a little while down the road, we're going to start putting in actual names for it. And this is a mix of all sorts of different things. So Music Sunday, this is an annual tradition in this congregation. Homecoming and Welcome in other parts of the country, it might be after Labor Day, but out here it's towards the end of August. Labor Day, I know I'm going to preach on something labor related, or if we have a guest that they're going to. The water ingathering, the water ritual that happens each year. All Souls Sunday that some of our congregations do, and I've done for many years, a time to memorialize our dead. Thanksgiving, whether or not the service is all about Thanksgiving, it's gotta at least be something about Thanksgiving in there somewhere. December starts to get really busy. We've had an undocumented immigrant guest in Sanctuary here and for 4 years now, and this is the anniversary service for it. A time for rededication and recommitment. Again, you're going to find things like this that are unique to your specific context and history and congregation. I do a Blue Holiday service each year to name and lift up the reality that the holidays are not always merry and bright. They can be challenging too. This is our pageant service. This year it was a solstice-based pageant that our Minister for Religious Education runs. This is an all-ages solstice service on the solstice itself that we hold outdoors. 3 different Christmas Eve services. I do a question box service the first Sunday of every year where folks can submit questions during the service, and instead of a sermon, I just answer them on the spot. So this is, rather than a holiday tradition or a church tradition, this is very much a David tradition. MLK Sunday, and the 30 days of Side with Love. So when I'm sitting here in July figuring out what the year is going to look like, I don't know what these Sundays, or especially I don't know what these Sundays are going to be exactly. But I know that they're going to be something coordinated with Side with Love, even if not every single one is. There's going to be a bunch in there that are. Pledge Drive kicks off and the Pledge Drive finishes. Doesn't mean that those services are going to be all about pledging from the start to the finish, but there's going to be some tie-in there. That's just a random extra name stuck in there. An installation, this is my first year here, so there'll be an installation service April 3rd in the afternoon. I do a service of lamentation on Good Friday. And again, this is sort of a David tradition that I bring in, a service to face squarely and unflinchingly, without resolution, suffering and hopelessness in the world, which of course is then answered by Easter. Earth Day service is a long-standing tradition in this congregation. We have a coming of age program, so we do bridging. Music Sunday is going to be followed by our annual meeting this year, and here's my name again randomly. It can be deleted at this stage. Okay, I took the time to walk through all of these because the point here is that a very large number of Sundays through the year are determined either in topic or at least needing to touch on and connect with holidays in the world, traditions in the congregation, or annual practices that you would bring as the minister. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of Sundays scheduled. What's the next thing to do is to figure out, when are you going to be away? When are the Sundays that you're going to take off? My contract, like most and hopefully all, specifies a Sunday off each month, entirely relieved of all ministry duties. And so that's when we have lay leaders, affiliated community ministers, or guest preachers. So what I do at the outset is I go through here, and I've highlighted each of the Sundays that I'm going to be away. And some of those coincide with, like, this music Sunday over the summer. Isn't really something I need to be there for. Now, in fact, I didn't move to the state of Colorado until the 11th of August, so that's why I'm away here. But what you can see is I'm picking Sundays to be away that aren't during sort of the major celebrations or events in the life of the congregation. I typically try hard not to do them back to back. I just tend to think that's a better practice, but occasionally it happens. So here's 2 back to back there, all the way through the end of the year. I still haven't gotten May figured out yet, because I don't want to take off too. Anyways, you don't need to know my process. But the point is, the next thing to do is you add in what Sundays are you away. And then, now, really only now at this stage of the game, are you starting to think about, well, what do I want to preach on? What is the topic on the Sundays that I'm going to preach? And some of these turns out to be narrowed dramatically. So September, a month of embracing possibility, ironically only has really one Sunday possible for me to choose and preach and engage with what embracing possibility might mean. Because I'm going to preach about labor the first Sunday. I'm going to preach about the water in gathering and water service. That second Sunday, then we've got a guest. Okay, so we've got our dates, we've got our holidays and events, we've got time off plugged in. Now we go into titles and blurbs and start plugging stuff in. Not every congregation does these blurbs, and I have real mixed feelings about the value of them. I hate writing them, is really what it boils down to. Someone told me once, though, and I take it to heart, that blurbs are the way for the newcomer, the person who has no idea whatsoever what church is about, to get a window into the sort of things that we do here. Take Water in Gathering. In this annual service, we celebrate our community and connection, our individual choice to deliberately make a life among a larger whole. The audience for that blurb is not the person who's been here for 20 years. It's really the newcomer who said, what? What is this thing? What does that mean? All sorts of different ways to do it. You're seeing a lot of fairly finished blurbs here, because we're halfway through the year, so all of these have been finalized. But often what I'll do is just start with notes. So like on February 20th, I don't actually know, it's January 31st right now. This is cutting it close. I'm not exactly sure what the content of that service will be, but I do know that in that service, we're going to welcome 3 new affiliated community ministers. So I've got that in there at least as a start. Or down here, May 8th is going to be Mother's Day. We're going to do child dedications right afterwards. So you can put in notes into that description, even if you don't have the full blurb. Okay, so the other thing that's going on here is the speakers have all been filled in. So I've started putting in the names of folks for the days that I'm away. Reverend Dana Lightsey serves as the associate here, so she's preaching this first Sunday. I'm out of town, and etc. And then I've started putting in topics. So homecoming and welcome. Where is the center then? I won't go into all of the details, but the point of this is to say, many of these services have sort of been determined for me. And so like for the Labor Day service here, it's angled towards what does fairness mean and why is it difficult to make it real? What would it look like for fairness to begin in solidarity and empathy? And I preached on the parable of the workers in the vineyard and sort of unpacked that. So the topic is the details of it is my own choice, but the topic or idea is suggested by the holiday more than anything else. So you've got your titles and your descriptions in here, and you can see as the year goes on, some of this gets a little bit more vague. I know in April, for example, I know very well what that service of laments is going to look like. I know what Easter is going to look like. I don't really know what this other stuff is going to look like yet. So some of this you're building as the year goes on. Once you know who your preacher is, what your basic title and idea for the service is, the last piece that I think is terribly important to include in building a worship calendar is who's doing what. So that's all the highlighted stuff over here. And in this congregation, we have a worship leader. Sometimes that's called a worship associate, a person providing a welcome and leading some other components of the service. There's a tradition in this congregation of chalice lighters who are different than the worship leaders. Our chalice lighters write a reflection and share it during the service. The choir or music, what's going on with that this week? Is our music director away? Is our band here playing? That's the Chancel Cats. What are the ideas for hymns or music? That's the stuff that goes in here. Sliding over a little bit, these days we've got an AV person or a couple of people also who are running the live stream from the sanctuary, and that's separate from the Zoom host who's there to sort of run the boundaries on Zoom. And it's also separate from ushers, which is entirely blank because we haven't had ushers this year, this weird pandemic year. But this is your basic idea. You're starting from dates. You're working out to say what Sundays are available, what Sundays am I leading, what Sundays do I need to find someone. You're figuring out what you want to do with those Sundays, which is sort of a separate topic than putting together the worship calendar itself. And then you're adding in all of the folks who are involved in making that service happen, who's getting scheduled where. Something that's not reflected in this calendar, this is the calendar from the church that I serve right now. So I sort of inherited the format for it this year. Things that I like to add that aren't here are the time for all ages, if you've got one. So what is that time for all ages going to be and who's going to be doing it? In this congregation, it's often me doing it. In a previous congregation, we had a director of religious education who would do it every Sunday. So you want to get clarity in tracking because they're going to be out and away some Sundays. So you want to get clarity in who's doing it and what is it. That's also a communication tool because if your DRE is putting together the time for all ages, you need to know what it is because the sermon and the whole rest of the service needs to connect to it also. So you need to have visibility on that. I also really like, and it hasn't quite been our practice with this schedule yet, to include the hymns that we're singing. The advantage there is to have visibility over the course of the year. Are we singing the same 10 hymns over and over and over again, or are we mixing it up? Or when you think back, man, do you remember 4 months ago there was that hymn that no one could sing and it really crashed and burned? Yeah, what was that thing? Well, you've got a way to track it here. So that's the basic idea behind a worship calendar. I've done this in Excel. You can do it in all sorts of formats, but I think that the key thing is that you've got a single source of truth for what's happening every Sunday. Because this is also going to feed a whole lot of other areas. The title and description are going to feed into communication. The chalice lighter and worship leader feed into monthly meetings that I hold with all my worship leaders and chalice lighters for the coming month to talk and think together about the theme, and so on and so forth. So that's the idea. It starts from a blank page and it builds out from there.